I don't even know if anyone will read this, but if I don't get something down, I'm likely to lose my shit worse than I already have. I am prisoner B68954, but you can call me Brad. I've been here for the last 10 years, and I gotta say that prison life is not as bad as they make it out to be. 3 squares a day, 2 trips to the yard a week, and not once has anybody tried to screw me in the shower, dropped soap or not. This place is weird though, and I should know. I've spent a lot of my life in and out of places like this. I went to juvie when I was 11 for beating another kid nearly to death. The court said it was assault, but if they'd seen what he'd been doing with my little sister, and him 14 years and bigger than her, they'd have given me a medal. But since my little sister refused to testify, and his friends said he hadn't done anything, I got 3 years in juvenile rehabilitation. Juvenile rehabilitation is a fancy word that grown-ups use for a place where older kids rack you over daily for being littler than them, and your life is basically a living hell. I've seen some things that would wreck your whole life in there, but I survived, and when they let me out at 14, my real career began. I was in and out of jail and juvenile rehabilitation centers for the rest of my teenage life. Breaking and entering, assault, drugs, public intoxication, and truancy were a few of their favorites. But if they'd known the other stuff I got up to, they'd have locked me away and thrown away the key. Once I was 18, I found my true calling as a bank robber. Some of the guys in the gang I ran with had lofty ideas about getting rich and getting out, but it was all about the thrill for me. At my trial, I was accused of robbing 18 banks throughout the state, but the system was off, big time, once again. I'm pretty sure it was more like 27 banks, but it gets a little fuzzy after a while. I'm not sure it counts if you rob the same bank more than once. I may have robbed 30 banks, but I can honestly say that murder wasn't my bag. The lady at number 26 who got shot was a fluke. She startled me, friggin' old broad, and the gun just went off in my hand. I never learned whether she lived or died, but after that job, I got sloppy, and that's why I'm here. Stagview Correctional Institution has been my home since, I don't know. As far as prisons go, it's not too bad. Chow's alright. Not the best, but alright. On the yard, the guys there give me some distance while I pump iron or run the track. And if I want to join a basketball game or something, I'm always more than welcome. There are gangs, there always are, but I decided when I first got here that I wasn't going to be part of any prison gangs. I'd keep my nose clean and my head down and serve out my time. Plus, it's nice to not to have to sleep with one eye open while you wait for that shiv from a rival gang. I take my shower, go to my court-appointed anger management, don't make trouble in the yard, and generally keep my nose clean so I can get paroled. It's a good system, but man, it feels like I've been here a million years sometimes. At least, until today it did. C.O. Hanscom and C.O. Bright came to get me for a head shrinking session today. I started to refuse, but it never seems to do any good. Every few years, they stick me in with some head shrinker who tries to get me in the right frame of mind for parole hearings. They talk a lot of talk about how I need to wake up to my situation and make better choices once I've paid my debt to society. It's a crock of shit, of course. I know for a fact they don't let murderers out of here, and even if they did, they certainly don't let murderers, bank-robbing career criminals out of prison early for good behavior. The parole hearings are usually just as much of a shit show as the therapy sessions. They bring me in front of the board, and I charm them and tell them that I know what I've done and that I'm sorry, and basically what they want to hear. Then they say, well, this is a model inmate who's ready for re-entry into society. And then I get taken right back to my cell, and my whole day seems to start over again. They never change around here. Nothing ever changes but the Friday special. At least that's what I thought. Hanscom and Bright wouldn't tell me anything about this new shrink, but that's okay. I like both of them pretty good. They're good guys as far as screws go. It's weird how every time I see them though, I feel like I've met them before. Hanscomb's a mystery. Big lanky guy that doesn't say much, but Bright's no mystery at all. He looks like Tommy B, a fella I was in a gang with back in my teenage days. These two could have been brothers, maybe even twins, and it's always comforting to see a familiar face in here. The two lead me to a familiar little room and unlock the door so I can meet this new shrink. It's a lady this time. I've had female shrinks before, but this one's a real babe. Tall, long legs, really fills out that pantsuit, with long blonde hair that she's turned into ringlets. Except it's weird, but I get this weird feeling around her when I look at her. She's real familiar, but it's also kind of a guilty feeling I get. Like when you see your mom naked, you get a little hot. She looks at me over the top of her librarian glasses though, and I can see that all she's feeling towards me is another success story. She's got some things I'd like to make a story out of, but thinking about her and me together makes me feel weird again. There's just something about her that makes me feel wrong for feeling that way. It makes me defensive, almost at once. Hello, Bradley. How are you feeling today? Her voice is light and sexy, very appealing. Brad. Nobody calls me Bradley since my mom died. Her face registers momentary pain, but she hides it well. Okay, Brad. My name's Catherine, and I'm here to prepare you for my next bullshit session with the parole board, right? She quirked a delicate eyebrow. Do you not want to be paroled? She asked, and it wasn't in the angry way they usually ask. Coming from her, it sounded like she was genuinely interested. Maybe disappointed, kinda. Lady, I say, but she cut me off immediately. Catherine, I find the idea that they'd let a guy like me out of prison hilarious. Why is that? She asked, not taking notes in favor of staring into me in that way with those way too familiar eyes. Well, Catherine, I'm a career criminal. I've been in the system longer than I've been out, and that makes for a very high turnover rate. Plus, I'm pretty sure they don't let people who murder people out of prison unless it's in a body bag. Who said you were a murderer? She asked. I laughed, but it came off as more of a scoff. Kathy, you ever shot somebody at close range with a shotgun? She shakes her head, and those sexy corkscrews bounce around a little. No. Well, I'm here to tell you it doesn't end well. I shot that lady close enough to vaporize her, and I saw how much blood was on the floor after I ran. If she ain't dead, then I'm a duck. Well, you better start quacking then, because your victim survived. Sat back a little. You serious? She looked back at my guards and asked them sweetly if they couldn't give her a moment alone with me. Bright warned her that I was likely to jump her the second the door closed, but she only glanced over and asked me if I'd ever do such a thing. I told her I wouldn't, and she turned back and told the guards she'd only need a few minutes. Hanscomb and Bright looked at each other, and after a few seconds' contemplation, they both left. Catherine waited until the door had closed and then leaned across the table. We don't have a lot of time, so I need you to listen to me. Listen to you? That got my attention. None of this is real. This prison, those guards, your prison friends, none of it's real. This prison is crafted from your imagination. Is this some of that therapist bullshit or something? The prison's in your mind. I'm the master of my destiny. Blah, blah, blah. She didn't relent. I'm very serious, Bradley. You need to listen very carefully. For a moment, her intensity kind of scared me. You are the subject of an ongoing research program named Sleep Away. In exchange for your cooperation, they took away your lengthy sentence in exchange for 10 years in the program. Hell are you talking about? I was getting a little weirded out by this whole exchange. Are you telling me I'm some kind of guinea pig in some big experiment that's been going on for 10 years? No, she said, looking a little pained. I'm telling you that you're the subject of an experiment that's been going on for the last 25 years. I sat in stunned silence for a few seconds as I tried to process what she was telling me. That's impossible. I've only been here for 10 years. how long were you here before the parole board started meeting with you? She asked the question and smirked, like she already knew the answer. 5 years, I said, but I knew that was wrong. Had it been 10 years since they started coming around? 15, maybe? It was hard to tell in this place. Time's weird after a while. Sometimes the day feels like a week, and a year feels like an afternoon. I thought back and was pretty sure it had been 8 years at the most. When I said so, her next question came in just as guarded. And how many parole hearings have you been to over the last 10 years? 3 was my first thought, but that was wrong. 5? Maybe as many as 12. It was the same problem as before. They all ran together in a long line of faces behind a table. The more I thought about it, though, the more I realized they were the exact same 3 faces. The black lady in the pantsuit, who looked like my caseworker. The bald guy with the mustache and the pressed white shirt, who looked like my shop teacher at the juvenile facility I'd been at when I was 13. And the Chinese guy in the business suit reminded me of the guy who sold drugs for us when I was in the gang. Faces I knew, even though some were vague. People who'd come back to me on the inside. That's when I started thinking about Hanscom and Bright again, and I realized Bright didn't just look like Tommy B. He was Tommy B the last time I'd seen him. Tommy was going to get his life back together for his son, he said. He'd hopped a bus and left town for good. Hanscom, though, why was he so familiar? Then it hit me. He was the guy at the liquor store who always sold us booze on discount. But then who was this therapist? I'd never seen anyone like her. Or had I? I'd wager I look pretty familiar too, don't I? That made me shiver a little because I'd been thinking that exact same thing. I bet if you thought hard enough, thought back to the day you were in court, you'd realize I looked just like your little sister. I felt sweat breaking all over me. She was right. Kathy. When I'd seen her in the court that day, I didn't even recognize her. I'd let my mind wander to the hot little number in the front row a few times. I'd had fantasies about running my hands through those corkscrew curls, feeling her skin under my hands, anything really to take my mind off being in court. When she'd taken the stand and they'd identified her as my little sister, though, I felt like I could just puke right there. Man, I'm a hardened criminal and all, but I ain't into that. I felt more ashamed when she told them how I'd always been kind to her, beating up that boy who tried to grope her, making sure she had money, taking care of her and my parents when they couldn't be bothered. Thinking back, I had to wonder if maybe she was the reason I was in this program at all. I sat there, stunned, and when she leaned across the table towards me, I leaned away a little bit. I don't look like this anymore, Brad. Life's been hard for me since you went away. You've been inside for nearly 26 years, and if I'd known you were stuck in purgatory, I'd have come to help you 15 years ago. I felt tears welling up in my eyes. Kathy? Is it really you? She reached across the table then and took my hand. I'm sorry, Bradley. I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you when we were kids, the way you stood up for me. But I'm trying to make amends. I'm trying to get my big brother back before it's too late. Too late? Too late for what? Can't they just pull the plug and let me out? No, Bradley. Pulling the plug would kill you. But there's a way that you can get out. All these parole hearings were put into place to release you from the program. Your mind has been returning you to that cell all these years instead of releasing you. You are the one keeping yourself trapped here, Brad, not the technicians. And you're the one that's going to have to let yourself out. How? I asked, already falling into desperation. I was never smart, never good at stuff like this, and the thought of thinking my way out of this thing made my head hurt. A part of my mind still argued that this was all crap. The shrink was just trying to mess with me. But if that was the case, then how did she look like Kathy? How did she know how I felt when I looked at her? How did she know so much about things that I'd only ever thought about? The technicians sent me in for only a short time. As far as they're concerned, the experiment is a success. 9 candidates waking up out of 10 is fine. 1 in 10 is an acceptable margin for error when you're dealing with people classified as undesirables. If I come back and you don't wake up before the end of the day, then they're gonna pull the plug and you'll die. When I leave though, your guards will come back and they'll take you before the parole board. When they say you can go, you have to go with them. No matter what happens, you have to go with them, okay? She stiffened for a minute, as though listening to something that only she could hear. Finally, she turned back to look at me. They're bringing me out. Don't forget, you have to go with the parole board if you want to live. You have to go with them, Bradley. Then, before my eyes, she started to fade out like someone being beamed up in a bad sci-fi movie. I love you, big brother. She said it just before she disappeared entirely. Then they took me back to my cell. Bright and Hanscombe walked me back to my cell, where I paced and worried about the coming meeting. I had to go with them, no matter the outcome. I had to go with them. I had to get out of here. This would be my only chance at escape. And if I were going to get out of here, if I were going to get out of my own head, the moment would be now, and it would be fleeting. But the moment never came. I've been sitting here for hours now, and no one has come to get me. I'm banging on the door, trying to wrench it open, screaming till I was hoarse, but no one has come to get me. I found this stack of paper on the table with a pen, and I started writing all this out. So maybe there would be some record of the last few hours of my life. I don't know what's going on. Maybe my mind is still trying to keep me here, or maybe they never ran the program to bring me out. But if anyone ever reads this, if anyone ever sees this, please do me one favor. Tell my little sister, Catherine Swain Cooper, that I love her, and I thank her for trying to help her stupid, worthless big brother escape the unescapable. Tell her thanks for trying to help me escape from my own brain. Found in the basement of Stragview Correctional Institute in the files of Bradley Swanson Cooper. The file identifies him as subject number 10. Good evening, my little creeperonies. It's me, Dr. Plague. Thank you so much for joining me for my Wednesday reading. If you enjoyed the show, we have a Patreon. You can always support us there. $5 contributors have their names read at the end of my videos. Since there's no names, you could be the first. Be the first one to get your name up there. Or you can always buy one of my books on Amazon. We're reading from Internet Nightmares, which is my first one. There's only about 2 or 3 stories left before we're at the end, so pick up your copy and you can read along. After that comes Dark Vortex, so you can go ahead and get your copy of that and read along with us when we get to that one. 30 stories for the price isn't bad at all. And again, I thank you for tuning in. Tune in next time on Saturday for Bump in the Night Part 3, which should be pretty good. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.